He was just a janitor everyone ignored, until the CEO fired him in front of the whole company. Weeks later, armed criminals stormed the building, and the man they called worthless became the only hope to save them all. Watch till the end to see how this shocking twist left the arrogant CEO begging for forgiveness. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your support helps us bring you even more unbelievable true-to-life stories every day. The skyline of Holloway Global stretched across the city like a glimmering crown of steel and glass, its corporate headquarters towering above all else. The building itself was a symbol of power, sleek reflective windows that caught the morning light, polished marble floors that whispered wealth with every step, and an atmosphere so charged with ambition it felt electric. Every corner was meticulously maintained, every surface immaculate, because appearances mattered in this empire. To its CEO, Edward Holloway, perfection was not a suggestion, it was law. Edward Holloway, a man in his mid-50s with sharp cheekbones and silver-streaked hair, surveyed his empire from the top floor. His office was perched like an eagle's nest, offering panoramic views of the bustling streets far below. He wore success like armor, a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, Italian leather shoes polished to a mirror shine, and a gold watch that gleamed under the soft light of the city skyline. To Edward, the people who worked beneath him were cogs in his machine, useful so long as they turned without squeaking. The moment they faltered, they were discarded without hesitation. This ruthless efficiency defined Holloway Global's corporate culture. Employees scurried through hallways, heads bowed, clutching reports and laptops as though their lives depended on them. And in many ways, they did. Behind closed doors, whispers of recent firings echoed like ghost stories, cautionary tales warning others to stay in line. To survive here, one had to be perfect, tireless, and invisible. Invisible. That was exactly what Michael Rowan had been for the past 2 years. Michael moved silently through the corridors in a crisp blue janitor's uniform, pushing a cart filled with cleaning supplies. At first glance, he appeared ordinary. A man in his early 50s with graying hair, weathered hands, and eyes that carried stories no one bothered to ask about. Few in the building even knew his name. Fewer still cared. He arrived each evening as the office began to quiet, performing his duties with quiet efficiency, emptying trash bins, wiping down surfaces, mopping floors until they shone. While the executives debated profit margins and marketing campaigns, Michael slipped unnoticed through their world, blending into the background like part of the furniture. But beneath the calm exterior lay a past that no one at Holloway Global could have imagined. Michael had once been part of an elite special forces unit, trained to survive in the harshest conditions and neutralize threats with precision and silence. He had seen battlefields most civilians could not comprehend, endured missions that haunted his nights, and carried scars, some visible, most buried deep within. Years ago, he had walked away from that life, seeking peace in anonymity. Holloway Global's janitorial job offered exactly that: routine, predictability, and quiet. Yet peace is fragile, and all it takes is one spark to shatter it. The company's annual gala was a lavish affair, held in the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in golden light. Orchestral music floated in the background, and servers weaved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Executives mingled in tailored suits and designer dresses, trading shallow compliments and corporate gossip. Edward Holloway stood at the center of it all, a practiced smile fixed on his face as he basked in the admiration of his peers. Michael had been assigned to assist the catering staff that evening, a last-minute request due to a shortage of workers. He moved quietly among the guests, offering glasses of wine and small plates of appetizers. Most barely acknowledged him, a nod here, a murmured thanks there, before turning back to their conversations about profits, acquisitions, and future expansions. Michael didn't mind. Anonymity was his shield, but fate rarely respects the plans of men. It happened in an instant. As Michael maneuvered through the crowded ballroom with a tray of red wine, someone bumped into him from behind. The impact sent him stumbling forward, his balance faltering for the briefest second. The tray tilted, the glasses tumbled, and crimson liquid arced through the air like falling petals. It splashed across Edward Holloway's pristine white shirt and tailored suit jacket, staining them in vivid scarlet. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward the unfolding scene. Edward froze, his expression twisting from surprise to fury in the span of a heartbeat. Slowly he looked down at the wine soaking his clothes, then up at Michael, the quiet janitor who dared stain his perfection. "You clumsy idiot!" Edward's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Do you have any idea what the suit costs? It's worth more than your entire salary for the year." Michael set the empty tray aside, his face calm, voice low. "It was an accident, sir." "An accident?" Edward's tone dripped with contempt. "You're an accident, a worthless janitor who can't even manage to walk straight. I should have known better than to let someone like you anywhere near this event." The room remained silent, guests shifting uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or look away. No one spoke up for Michael. No one dared challenge Edward Holloway. "You're fired," Edward snapped. "Effective immediately. I don't want to see your face in my building ever again. Do you understand me?" Michael held Edward's gaze unflinching. For a fleeting moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, but something colder, sharper. Then with a small nod, he replied evenly, "I understand." Edward sneered. "Good. Get out of my sight." Hours later, the gala resumed its shallow glamour as though nothing had happened. Laughter returned, music swelled, and the incident with the janitor became nothing more than a whispered anecdote for board executives. But for Michael Rowan, everything had changed. He left the hotel quietly, carrying only a small box of belongings. No anger burned in him, only a familiar quiet resolve. He had been underestimated before. He had been cast aside before. The world had a way of revealing true character in moments of crisis, and Edward Holloway had just revealed his. In the days that followed, Michael vanished from the lives of Holloway Global's employees. Some barely noticed his absence. Others whispered rumors about why he was fired. Only one person, Laura Bennett, the company's HR manager, couldn't shake the image of Michael's steady eyes amid Edward's rage. There was something about him she couldn't quite place, something that didn't fit the mold of a simple janitor. Weeks later, that unease would prove prophetic, because Holloway Global's empire, gleaming and untouchable, was about to face its greatest threat yet, and the only person capable of saving it was the man they had cast aside. 2 months passed after Michael Rowan's quiet dismissal from Holloway Global. The company continued its relentless pursuit of profit, oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon. Inside the gleaming tower, employees scurried about their daily routines, unaware that their lives were about to be turned upside down in a single day. That day began like any other. Emails, phone calls, board meetings, endless reports, until chaos walked through the front doors. It started at 9:47 a.m. A convoy of black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of Holloway Global's headquarters. Doors burst open, and a dozen men clad in tactical gear spilled out with military precision. Their faces were obscured by masks, their movements sharp and purposeful. In seconds, they flooded the lobby, rifles raised, barking orders. The receptionist barely had time to scream before she was forced to the ground. Security guards reached for their weapons but were instantly outmatched. 2 were disarmed, 1 was struck unconscious, the others forced to their knees. The leader of the group entered last, his presence commanding even amid the chaos. Ramon Ramirez Ortega, a name whispered in the criminal underworld, strode through the shattered calm with the composure of a man who had orchestrated dozens of violent takeovers. His scarred face and cold eyes radiated menace. Unlike his men, Ramirez carried himself with calm efficiency. Violence was not his passion, but his profession. "Lock it down," Ramirez ordered, voice low but lethal. His men obeyed without hesitation. Steel barricades slammed shut at every entrance. Electronic locks sealed the elevators. Communication lines were cut. In under 5 minutes, Holloway Global transformed from a corporate hub into a fortress of fear. Edward Holloway was in his top-floor office when the first alarm sounded. At first, he dismissed them as a malfunction, a minor inconvenience in his perfectly controlled empire. But when his assistant burst through the door, pale and trembling, words tumbling over themselves. Armed men, hostages, lockdown. Reality crashed in. By the time Edward stepped into the hallway, it was already too late. Masked men swarmed every floor, corralling employees at gunpoint. The once orderly office descended into chaos. Terrified screams, the crash of overturned furniture, the sharp commands of the intruders. Within minutes, Edward himself was seized, dragged toward the boardroom where dozens of employees were already huddled together. Among them was Laura Bennett, the HR manager whose instincts about Michael Rowan had never left her. She clutched her phone, praying for an opportunity to act. Ramirez addressed the hostages with chilling calm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the terrified silence. "You work for Holloway Global, a company swimming in wealth. Today that wealth becomes ours. No one needs to die unless, of course, someone decides to be a hero." His men moved through the crowd, collecting phones and valuables, shouting orders to separate high-ranking executives from lower-level staff. Edward Holloway, now trembling despite his carefully cultivated bravado, was dragged to the front. "You must be the king of this castle," Ramirez said, almost amused. "Edward Holloway, the man who thinks he owns the world." Edward swallowed hard, his voice shaking. "Do you know who I am? You can't do this. You'll never get away with—" Ramirez struck him across the face, the blow sharp and deliberate. "I know exactly who you are," he hissed, "and you're going to help me get everything I want." Hours dragged by. The employees sat in terrified silence, guarded by men with rifles and dead eyes. Some wept quietly, others stared blankly at the floor, too afraid to speak. Edward sat apart, hands bound, seething with anger and humiliation. His empire, his perfect world, had crumbled in a single morning. And then, amid the despair, a spark of hope flickered. Laura Bennett had managed to keep her phone hidden, tucked beneath the hem of her blazer. With trembling hands, she shielded it from view and scrolled through her contacts. She didn't know why she hesitated on Michael Rowan's name, the janitor they'd fired weeks ago. But something about him, about the way he'd handled himself that night at the gala, told her he was different. Without thinking, she pressed call. Miles away, Michael Rowan sat in a modest apartment, surrounded by the quiet life he had built for himself. A small duffel bag lay half-packed by the door, a habit he had never broken from his years in the military. The phone buzzed on the table beside him, and when he saw the name Laura Bennett, he felt a faint stir of surprise. "Laura," he answered, voice steady despite the urgency he heard in hers. Her words tumbled out in a whisper, frantic and hurried. "Armed men, building under siege, hostages, Edward Holloway captured." She didn't know why she called him, only that no one else would understand. Michael's posture shifted instantly. The quiet janitor's demeanor melted away, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of a soldier awakening from long slumber. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask unnecessary questions. "I'll be there," he said simply, and hung up. Within minutes, Michael was on the move. The dusty duffel bag, long neglected, was unzipped to reveal its hidden contents. Tactical gear, compact weapons, tools of a life he had tried to bury. He strapped on a Kevlar vest, loaded spare magazines, and checked each piece with mechanical precision. Every motion was muscle memory, the rhythm of a man who had done this 100 times before. As he drove toward Holloway Global, memories surged unbidden. Jungles at dawn, deserts at midnight, the screams of fallen comrades, the deafening silence after explosions. He had walked away from that life, swearing never to return. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. The skills he wanted to forget were now the only thing standing between dozens of innocent lives and certain death. The building loomed ahead as Michael parked a block away, out of sight of the flashing police lights that now surrounded the tower. Officers shouted into radios, negotiators huddled behind barricades, but the situation was spiraling beyond their control. Ramirez's men had fortified every floor. Attempts at negotiation were met with silence or thinly veiled threats. Michael didn't waste time with introductions. He slipped him through a side alley, using service entrances and maintenance tunnels he knew from his years as a janitor. He moved like a shadow, bypassing the police perimeter entirely. In moments, he was inside. The familiar hallways, once a place of quiet routine, were transformed into a war zone. Abandoned briefcases, overturned chairs, shattered glass littered the corridors. Michael's eyes scanned every corner, noting positions, listening for patterns in the intruders' movements. Their tactics were professional: patrols at regular intervals, communication via hand signals, layered security around key areas. These were not amateurs. Ramirez's men were ex-military, disciplined, trained, dangerous. But so was Michael. Silently, he descended into the building's hidden arteries: service shafts, maintenance corridors, stairwells that most employees never knew existed. He moved with purpose, calculating every step. The mission was clear: locate the hostages, neutralize the threat, and end the siege before innocent lives were lost. In the main lobby, Ramirez's voice echoed over the building's PA system, a chilling promise. "Every hour we wait, without cooperation, someone pays the price." Michael tightened the straps on his gear, his jaw set. The janitor was gone. The soldier had returned, and Holloway Global was about to discover who Michael Rowan truly was. Michael Rowan slipped deeper into the heart of Holloway Global, the weight of the building's familiar silence pressing in on him. The place that once echoed with routine, the hum of printers, the quiet shuffle of employees' footsteps, the soft murmur of meetings behind glass walls, now groaned under the tension of a siege. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant shout from the armed men felt magnified in the heavy stillness. Michael's breathing was steady, each inhale and exhale controlled, his senses sharpened to a razor's edge. The soldier within him had fully awoken. He moved through the maintenance shafts like a ghost, retracing routes he had memorized during years of quiet labor. He knew where every door led, where every hallway curved, which walls hid old service panels long forgotten by corporate staff. These hidden arteries of the building were his battlefield advantage, the difference between life and death. While Ramirez's men patrolled the main corridors, Michael stalked them from unseen angles, planning every strike with precision born of countless covert missions. His first encounter came on the 12th floor. Two armed men stood guard outside a conference room, their rifles slung loosely over their shoulders, their attention divided between the hallway and whispered conversation. Michael studied them silently, noting the sloppy discipline in their posture. Ex-soldiers perhaps, but rusty and overconfident. He crouched low, slid a length of cord from his pack, and waited for the perfect moment. When one turned slightly to light a cigarette, Michael struck. He moved fast and quiet, a blur in the dim light. The first guard went down without a sound, strangled into unconsciousness before he could raise the alarm. The second barely had time to react before Michael's elbow smashed into his temple, dropping him instantly. The bodies were dragged out of sight, secured and silent. 2 threats removed, dozens more to go. Michael entered the conference room cautiously. Inside, a cluster of terrified employees huddled against the far wall, faces pale, eyes wide with disbelief. They recognized him immediately. Whispers rippled through the group. The janitor, the man who had been fired. Yet there he stood, transformed into something entirely different. Body armored, movements precise, gaze unflinching. Laura Bennett was among them, her relief palpable. She started to speak, but Michael raised a hand for silence. His calm presence quieted the panic in the room more effectively than any words could. In hushed tones, he gave them quick instructions. Stay low, stay quiet, wait for his signal when the way was clear. Without further explanation, he slipped out again, leaving them to wonder who this man really was. Each floor presented new challenges. Ramirez's men were well coordinated, using radios and hand signals to maintain control. But Michael was patient. He exploited every gap in their routines, turning their discipline against them. He created diversions by tripping fire alarms in isolated sections of the building, luring patrols away from key positions. He used reflections in shattered glass walls to track their movements, anticipating their paths before they even turned corners. Every takedown was clean, efficient, silent, a symphony of controlled violence performed by a man who had mastered his craft. As Michael worked, word began to spread among the hostages. Rumors whispered from one frightened mouth to another. Someone was fighting back. Guards were disappearing. The janitor was alive. Hope, fragile but persistent, began to flicker in their eyes. Meanwhile, Ramirez grew increasingly agitated. Reports of missing men crackled through his radio, each more frantic than the last. He barked orders to tighten security, to double patrols, to sweep every corner. But fear had crept into his crew, eroding their confidence. They had expected compliance, not resistance. They had prepared for frightened civilians, not a ghost in the walls. In the dim glow of the security control room, Michael scanned the building's camera feeds, piecing together the enemy's positions. He located the largest cluster of hostages in the main lobby, dozens of employees surrounded by armed guards. Edward Holloway sat apart from them, bound to a chair near the front, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. Fear and fury warred on his face. For the first time in his life, the man who believed himself untouchable was at the mercy of someone stronger. Michael's eyes narrowed as he studied the feed. He traced patrol routes, counted weapons, measured distances. The plan formed in his mind not as a sudden idea, but as an instinctive calculation, honed by years of training. Neutralize the outer guards first, create chaos in their communications, isolate Ramirez, and finish this before innocent blood was spilled. The next phase began with controlled chaos. Michael sabotaged the building's backup generators, plunging entire floors into darkness. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows that distorted every shape and sound. In the confusion, Michael struck swiftly, disabling radios, severing power to magnetic locks, freeing small groups of hostages one by one, and guiding them toward hidden service exits. Each rescue chipped away at Ramirez's control. The once tight-knit formation of his men began to unravel under the weight of paranoia. Every empty hallway, every sudden sound, every missing comrade gnawed at their nerves. The hunter had become the hunted, and Michael exploited their fear mercilessly. On the 14th floor, Michael discovered a stash of weapons abandoned by fleeing security staff. Shotguns, sidearms, flashbangs. He equipped himself with only what he needed, moving light and fast. Too much noise or firepower would put the hostages at risk. Precision, not brute force, was his ally. As he descended toward the lobby, the building trembled with tension. Shouts echoed faintly through the stairwells, punctuated by the metallic clatter of boots on tile. Ramirez's men were consolidating, pulling back toward their leader. Michael knew the confrontation was inevitable. Everything he had done so far was leading to one final battle, and that battle would be in the same boardroom where Edward Holloway once humiliated him. In the chaos below, Laura Bennett whispered Michael's name to terrified employees, reassuring them that help had come. They clung to that fragile hope, unaware that the man risking everything for them was the very one their CEO had thrown away like trash. As Michael approached the final set of doors, his heartbeat slowed, his focus narrowing to a razor point. The soldier inside him was fully awake now, calm in the storm, precise in the chaos. Every step brought him closer to Ramirez, closer to Holloway, closer to the inevitable reckoning. The time for silence was nearly over. The final confrontation was about to begin. The boardroom of Holloway Global had transformed from a monument of corporate ambition into a battlefield waiting to ignite. The polished mahogany table, once a site of quarterly triumphs and calculated deals, was littered with debris, shattered glass, overturned chairs, streaks of blood where earlier skirmishes had played out. At the head of the room stood Ramirez, scarred face lit by the dim glow of emergency lights. In one hand, he gripped a pistol, the muzzle pressed against Edward Holloway's temple. The CEO's eyes darted between terror and disbelief, sweat soaking the collar of his once pristine shirt. The man who once looked down on everyone now sat powerless, staring into the abyss of his own arrogance. Michael Rowan stepped through the shattered doorway without hesitation. His silhouette was calm and imposing, gear dusted from hours of crawling through vents and hallways. The moment he entered, Ramirez's gaze snapped to him, eyes narrowing in recognition. Not of the janitor Holloway had dismissed, but of the soldier he had just spent hours unknowingly fighting. The air thickened as predator met predator. "So," Ramirez said, voice low and edged with mockery, "you're the ghost my men keep whining about." Michael's stance was loose but coiled, every muscle prepared to strike. "Let them go, Ramirez. This ends now." "Bold word," Ramirez sneered, pressing the pistol harder against Holloway's head. One move and your old boss here gets his brains painted on the wall. Edward flinched but remained silent. For the first time in his life, words failed him. Apologies, pleas, bargains, all useless against the reality of death pressing cold metal against his skull. His mind flickered back to the night he humiliated Michael, the disgust in his own words, the arrogance in every sneer. Now that same man stood between him and oblivion. Ramirez shifted slightly, circling Michael with measured steps. I know men like you, he said. Military, special forces maybe? You think you're different, but you bleed the same as anyone else. Michael's expression didn't change. Difference is, he said quietly, I learned how to clean up messes like you. In an instant, the tension snapped. Ramirez fired. Michael dove to the side, the bullet shattering a glass wall behind him. He rolled, came up low, and hurled a flashbang he'd scavenged earlier. The room erupted in blinding light and deafening sound. Holloway screamed. Ramirez cursed, disoriented. Michael surged forward, closing the distance in seconds. The fight that followed was brutal and intimate. No wasted motion, no room for error. Ramirez swung his pistol like a club. Michael caught his wrist, twisted, drove a knee into the criminal's ribs. The gun clattered to the floor. Ramirez retaliated with a vicious elbow, splitting Michael's lip. But the soldier absorbed the pain, countering with a headbutt that left both men staggering. They traded blows, each strike echoing in the cavernous room like a drumbeat of war. Years of training clashed with raw ferocity. Every move was a test of will and endurance. Edward Holloway watched, helpless and transfixed. The janitor he had dismissed as worthless was moving with lethal precision, calculated, efficient, relentless. Each strike carried the weight of battles Holloway could never comprehend, sacrifices he had never imagined. For the first time, the CEO understood what true strength looked like, and it humbled him to his core. The fight ended as abruptly as it began. Michael feinted left, then pivoted right, driving Ramirez backward into the shattered conference table. The wood splintered under the impact. In one fluid motion, Michael locked the criminal's arm, twisted hard, and slammed him face first onto the ground. Ramirez roared in pain, struggling, but Michael had already drawn a pair of zip ties from his belt, securing the man's wrist with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, the threat was neutralized. Silence fell over the room, broken only by Michael's ragged breathing and Holloway's shaky exhale. Police sirens wailed faintly outside, growing louder as tactical teams prepared to breach the building. Unaware the battle inside was already won. Michael turned to Holloway, eyes calm once more. You all right? Holloway, still bound to the chair, nodded shakily. I don't understand. Who are you? Michael crouched to untie him. I was just the janitor, he said simply, until you made me something else. Holloway stared, words failing him again. The weight of his arrogance, his cruelty, crashed down on him all at once. I was wrong about you, he whispered. I misjudged you. He hesitated, then forced the words out. I'm sorry. Michael offered no judgment, only a faint nod. Save it for the people who work for you. They deserve better. Moments later, the doors burst open as SWAT officers flooded the room, weapons raised. Michael raised his hands calmly, identifying himself as friendly. The officers swarmed Ramirez, dragging the subdued criminal away. Holloway was escorted out, still trembling, but alive. The building, once a fortress of fear, was finally secure. By sunrise, the nightmare was over. Holloway Global's employees emerged from hiding, blinking against the morning light. Tears of relief mingled with whispered gratitude as survivors reunited. News crews swarmed the scene, hungry for details of the mysterious lone operative who had dismantled an entire hostage operation from within. Reporters shouted questions. Who was he? Where had he come from? Was he a cop? A soldier? A vigilante? But Michael Rowan was already gone. He slipped away before the cameras arrived, disappearing into the quiet streets with nothing more than the clothes on his back and the scars he carried inside. He wanted no fame, no reward, only the silence he had sought when he first took the janitor's job. The world didn't need to know his name. The people he saved would remember. And that was enough. Days later, Edward Holloway stood in his corner office, the same panoramic view stretching before him. But something fundamental had shifted. The city below no longer looked like an empire to conquer, but a responsibility to protect. The events of the siege haunted him. Not just the fear, but the shame. Shame at how he had treated the man who saved his life. Shame at how blind he had been to the value of those he deemed beneath him. Laura Bennett entered quietly, carrying a stack of recovery reports. Holloway turned to her, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Did he leave a name?" Laura shook her head. "Just Michael. That's all we know." Holloway nodded, gazing out the window. "If he ever comes back, tell him there's a place here for him. Head of security, consultant, whatever he wants. It's the least I can do." Laura hesitated. "Do you think he will?" Holloway exhaled, a hint of a sad smile on his lips. "Men like that don't look back, but I'll never forget him." Somewhere far from the corporate tower, Michael Rowan walked alone through quiet streets as dawn painted the city in soft gold. He carried no weapons now, no gear, only the weight of what he had done, and the quiet certainty that his work somehow wasn't finished. There would always be new messes to clean up, new battles to fight in the shadows. The janitor was gone. The soldier remained. And in the silence of the waking city, Michael Rowan disappeared once again, a legend whispered by those who owed him everything. If this story blew your mind, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more incredible stories coming that you won't want to miss. And let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Michael's place?